Good morning. Good morning, everyone. One of the most amazing things of living in Denmark is that things actually start on time. It's 9:58. Everybody is in their seats and we are ready. So welcome, everyone, excellencies, distinguished guests. It's a real pleasure to have you today at UN City here in Copenhagen. And a special welcome to those of you who are joining us online. My name is Émilie Potvin, and I am the Director of Partnerships at UNOPS. At UNOPS, for those of you who don't know us very well, our mandate is very clear. We get things done. We get things done on behalf of our partners all around the world. Today in Ukraine, with partners such as Japan, the EU, and Denmark, we are rebuilding schools. We're rebuilding kindergartens. We're working with local communities to rebuild entire neighborhoods. We are providing bomb shelters so that children can go back to the classroom. And we do that because we want to be a part of people going back to their lives, even if this unnecessary war is still ongoing. But when we talk about rebuilding communities and rebuilding lives, we cannot have that conversation without talking about energy, because energy is what powers communities. And so if we look at the latest stats, attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have caused over $10 billion of damages. Today, there are more than 12 million people who have no access to electricity or very limited access to electricity. Since the attack on the dam, more and more people don't have access to clean water. And so the conversation today is really about how do we make sure that we build back better, that we are able to build back greener with the great insights that we're going to hear from our panelists. But before we start that conversation, I have a few housekeeping items for you. Today's events will unfold in 2 sessions. This is the first session. We're going to end at 11. We're then going to have a little coffee break in the Atlantic Lounge, which is right there. We're going to have our second session at 11:15, and then we're going to end with a lunch. We hope that you are able to stay with us for lunch so that we can continue the conversation. And if you have any questions, the UNOPS team who greeted you when you came in is available to answer all your questions. And so now, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. I'm going to ask each of them to join me on stage. First, I'd like to welcome Mr. Yuri Vaskov, Deputy Minister for Communities, Territories, and Infrastructures of Ukraine. Mr. Dan Jorgensen, Minister for Cooperation and Global Climate Policy of Denmark. Mrs. Mary Warlick, Deputy Executive Director of the International Energy Agency. And Mr. Jorge Moreira da Silva, Undersecretary General and UNOPS Executive Director. Jorge, I would now ask you to take us through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Excellencies, Minister Dan Jorgensen, Deputy Minister Yuri Vaskov, Deputy Executive Director Mary Warlick, ambassadors, distinguished speakers and guests. It's an honor to welcome you at UN City here in Copenhagen in a sunny and windy day, which offers a real visualization of the renewable energy potential that I hope will inspire today's discussion. Along with our partners at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark and the Embassy of Ukraine in Denmark, we are proud to host this important conversation on how we can rebuild the energy infrastructure in Ukraine to be more sustainable and resilient. This is an important conversation for Ukraine, but also for Europe and globally when we consider not only the climate aspects, but also the energy security. In addition to the tremendous human suffering, as Emily just alluded to, this war has resulted in a tragic scale of infrastructure losses, which will take years and generations to rebuild. Around this room, you are all familiar with the scale of this damage. And obviously, we would like to hear more about this from the Deputy Minister Vaskov. Over $400 billion in projected reconstruction and recovery costs. This was a number that was presented again $10 billion in damage, leaving over 12 million people with no or limited electricity. Over $1.2 billion is urgently needed for emergency repairs. It's just for repairs. We know that we must go well beyond this for the reconstruction. Loss of infrastructure is not just about losing brick and mortar. It is about losing your loved ones, your home, your school, your local hospital, your community, and everything that makes life normal and functional. We know that loss of infrastructure steals youth right to the future. I have recently returned from Ukraine. Went to Kyiv, to Odessa, and to Mykolaiv 2 weeks ago, where I witnessed not just the scale of the devastation that is much more impressive than what we see in the news, but also the extraordinary resilience of the Ukrainian people and their determination to build back better. The international community owes it to them to provide additional support that both addresses immediate needs and delivers for the future sustainable development of Ukraine. Ukraine's journey of recovery and reconstruction and our role in supporting it requires a focus on long-term sustainable development and not just on short-term recovery. Clean energy provides a fundamental role here. This is clearly reflected in the recently adopted 2050 energy strategy for Ukraine, which sets out the country's ambitious goal to become carbon neutral in its energy sector by 2050. UNOPS, and I would say the entire UN system, stands ready to support the Ukrainian government in their journey to rebuild the energy system to make it cleaner, greener, more resilient, while becoming fully integrated with European standards. While the immediate focus is on repairing, restoring, and defending critical energy infrastructure, the move towards a green recovery will make the energy system more sustainable. It will also strengthen energy security, given Ukraine's current reliance on imported fossil fuels. Ukraine possesses substantial potential for renewable energy, from solar and wind to bioenergy and hydro resources. Tapping into this is key to building Ukraine's future energy system. With us today, we have a vast representation of people who have a great deal of experience in precisely this. And I know that you are all very keen to help. UNOPS, UNOPS is operations. It's about implementation, getting things done in the regions, in the field, in concrete terms. We are committed to supporting these efforts along with all partners, including our sister UN agencies. All agencies have specific skills and expertise to bring to the table. That's not by accident that we are here today at UN City, where 12 UN agencies have offices and deliver for the best. We are here to help all of them with implementation, not only when it comes to energy, but also in terms of infrastructure, reconstruction, mine action, and so much more. Over the past 16 months, my colleagues have worked hard to provide crucial assistance with a focus on emergency response and early recovery, in close collaboration with Ukrainian local, regional, and national authorities, the UN, and many other partners, including the World Bank. On behalf of partners such as Denmark, we have rapidly delivered significant volumes of essential equipment and supplies for vulnerable communities. We have also supported the early recovery and reconstruction efforts with a focus on advancing sustainable development. This effort includes the reconstruction of schools and the provision of infrastructure to ensure access to reliable and affordable energy in households, hospitals, and schools. It includes, for example, the provision of locally produced mobile boiler houses that run on byproduct from local agriculture production. In response to the breach of the Nova Kakhovka Dam and funded by Denmark, and again, I would like to thank the great partnership with the government of Denmark and their leadership in providing the support on energy, but also on the reconstruction of schools and neighborhoods. We are delivering water tank trucks and generators to provide access to drinking water and energy to the populations affected. And I had the chance when I visit Mykolaiv to see the relevance of this immediate support that Denmark is providing with partnership with UNOPS. Our support goes way beyond Ukraine. And I'm conscious that the effects of the war are being felt all around the globe. In Africa, I've had the chance to discuss this with several ministers in Africa and the impact of the war on energy and food, but also, and probably very much felt in this room, in neighboring countries. Neighboring countries who have opened their arms to thousands and thousands of refugees and who are playing a key role in this humanitarian crisis. I see a lot of these countries today represented by their ambassadors. And on behalf of us, I would like to thank you. We are also committed to ensuring we assist you with your specific needs. And that's why I've recently visited Moldova, where we are delivering some projects, and we are in a process of opening an office in Poland. Our focus is on concrete action on the ground to respond to the present and future needs, including on energy and other critical needs. Let me conclude by saying that we remain committed to supporting Ukraine and Ukrainian people to build the future that the country wants to see. This is driven and led by Ukraine and by Ukrainians, with sustainability, resilience, and green energy built into it. I look forward to our engaging in today's important conversation on how we can overcome the challenges in rebuilding a more sustainable and resilient energy future in Ukraine. I thank you.
Thank you, Georges, for providing more insights into what UNOPS is currently doing in Ukraine. I would now like to invite Deputy Minister Vaskov to provide a few remarks.
I would like to express our gratitude to the UNOPS team regarding the huge support of all Ukrainian current needs caused by full-scale Russian aggression. As it was already said, we feel such support in the whole sphere of our current needs. the Russian attacks achieved more than 150 billion euro. In order to rebuild all destroyed infrastructure, we need more than 400 billion euro, and only attacks to the energy infrastructure, which Ukraine received due to the Russian aggression during last winter, achieved 11 billion euros. The main weakness of our energy system, which affected by the Russian rockets, it was the over-centralization design and inflexibility for the power generation, as well as ineffective and expensive temporary solutions. Unfortunately, in June, we received additional terrorist acts like Kakhovka dam, which was destroyed by the Russians, and only to this act, around 1 million of our citizens, of Ukrainian people, faced a sharp deficit of the fresh water. So we already started together with the UNOPS, with United Nations team, to challenge with this problem. And I'm talking about this in order to explain that, of course, we have some short-term plan, we have long-term plans, but the continuous attacks, they changed our strategy and changed our particular work. But anyway, we are absolutely sure that together with our partners, together with our militaries, we will win in the nearest future, and Ukraine will have a huge next challenge. It's how to rebuild and to construct a modern and efficient energy system, which will be fully follow the green standards, the clean energy standards. And due to this reason, we highly appreciate these meetings today, and we hope that it will start the next program of our joint cooperation, how we'll do it on the practice. In order to plan the further steps for our energy sector renewal, our ministry, like coordinator of the whole restoration of our country, together with the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine, together with the Agency of Restoration and Energy Agency of Ukraine, we executed like a program for the further steps in this sphere. And my colleagues, Anna Zamazeyeva, the head of Energy Agency, my colleague Demchenkov, Deputy Minister of Energy, in the second session will describe more deeply the particular steps, but I would like to briefly to point the main directions. So the main objective in this sphere are strengthening the resilience of the Ukrainian energy system to emergencies, distributed energy generation, smart grids, small and medium scale energy generation, and protection for critical energy infrastructure facilities. Improving the reliability of municipal power and heat supply systems, including boiler houses, individual heating substations, water pumping station, hospital, etc. Stimulating reforms for more completion, eliminating vested interest influences and corruption, transparency, integrity of energy markets according to the European Union principles, and improving energy efficiency for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from power and heat generation within Ukrainian energy system, developing and integrating more renewables in the most affordable methods. We have a roadmap comprises 3 stages for the implementation. The first is short-term actions. These actions need to be done this and next year in order to be ready for the new winter season. First of all, this is emergency repair of the damages which we received during the previous year. The medium-term actions till 2026, which includes decentralization of power supply and in implementation of alternatives ways of the energy generation. And the long-term actions, it's like Ukrainian national energy strategy developed till the year 2050. Uh, In addition to the restoring energy infrastructure, our ministry on working on its passive protection, particularly protection systems, some nets, some arcs, physical protection against Russian attacks, big bags, gabions, blocks, etc., etc. We are producing. We were doing it last winter, and I think minimum 50% of our energy system now is safe due to this physical protection. But of course, we are doing it more deeply now, more seriously, in preparation for the new winter and unfortunately new Russian attacks. I would like to conclude my speech by expressing once again gratitude for your attention, for your support, for your readiness to go ahead together with us. We know that you're sure in our joint victory as all Ukrainian people do it, and we are sure that particularly this meeting and this event will bring a huge positive effect to our energy system and to the future of our country. Thanks a lot for your attention. Thanks a lot for your support.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, for providing additional information on the roadmap. We understand that there are some short-term needs, medium-term needs, and winterization is right around the corner. I would now like to invite Minister Dan Jorgensen from Denmark.
Thank you very much. And also, of course, thank you to UNOPS for organizing this event with us and the Ukrainian Embassy. And a very special welcome to you, Yuri. It's an honor to have you here. And as you know, Denmark stands behind you and will continue to do so. Now, the UN is a crucial partner, both when it comes to addressing immediate and long-term needs in Ukraine. My first visit as a Minister for Development, Cooperation and Global Climate Policy went to Ukraine, and more specifically to the region of Mykolaiv. There, I witnessed how the Danish deliveries makes a real difference on the ground. Denmark has made significant contributions to the reconstruction. We have helped to provide water, we've helped to provide energy, we've helped to provide heating, and we've helped to reconstruct houses and buildings. A significant part of our support is channeled through our UN partners. Partners who are doing an essential job delivering life-saving support to the Ukrainian people, providing shelter, emergency heating and electricity, and securing the protection of children. Despite Russia's heinous bombings of the Ukrainian power infrastructure, new Danish wind turbines are still spinning in Ukraine. And they will still be spinning long after Ukraine is liberated from the Russian occupation. In this sense, wind power, along with many other sustainable sources of energy, represents freedom and independence. Today, I look forward to discussing with my Ukrainian partners how we can continue to support the reconstruction of Ukraine and Mykolaiv, where we play a special role. How we together can rebuild a better and greener Ukraine. Denmark has a long history of promoting renewable energy. We've been at the forefront of the development of new energy sources, and we've got great experience in attracting private investors to sustainable energy projects. Since the Russian aggression, attracting investments to Ukraine's renewable energy sector has been difficult. But Denmark can assist Ukraine in setting up the right framework for attracting private capital and securing reliable green energy. The destruction of Ukrainian cities and infrastructure is a horrible sight, something we shouldn't have to experience in the 21st century. But reconstruction also represents an opportunity for Ukraine, an opportunity to recover and lay the foundations for a more resilient and sustainable future for the country and its people. In order to succeed in that, we need a concerted effort from all Ukraine's international partners and pivotal investors. We need to address the immediate needs of the Ukrainian people here and now, but we must not lose sight of the longer perspectives. We must not forget to put building back better and greener at the center of our priorities. We are already now pursuing the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. We've engaged more than 150 Danish companies and private funds, and we have helped create over 1,000 jobs in Ukraine. Danish companies can provide vital solutions for re-establishing Ukraine's energy and water infrastructure. They can provide district heating, energy efficiency in buildings, clean drinking water, efficient wastewater treatment, and many other things. Delivering many of the solutions needed by the Ukrainian people, Danish companies can play an important role in stimulating local economic growth. And that is crucial for the long-term development of Ukraine. Moving forward, it is absolutely vital that all partners supporting Ukraine work together, nationally and locally. Working together, we can create a stronger, better, and greener Ukraine for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And again, thank you for putting your trust in UNOPS in Mykolaiv. We're working with you on many different projects. I would now like to invite Marie Wernick from the International Energy Agency.
Well, thank you very much. Minister Jorgensen, Deputy Minister Vaskov, Undersecretary General De Silva, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, and thank you so much to UNOPS, to the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and to the Embassy of Ukraine here in Denmark for organizing today's really very important roundtable discussion on rebuilding sustainable energy infrastructure in Ukraine. There's no doubt that these continue to be exceptionally challenging times for Ukraine. The daily destruction being waged by Russia on Ukraine, its innocent civilians, their homes, their livelihoods, and infrastructure of all kinds has been truly devastating. And I can assure you, Deputy Minister, that the International Energy Agency, along with so many around the international community, condemn this aggression, and we stand fully in solidarity with Ukraine and its courageous and truly resilient people. For over 15 years, since 2007, the IEA has in fact been working quite closely with Ukraine on its energy policy priorities, including having conducted 4 in-depth reviews. And in July 2022, in recognition of the urgent need to really further strengthen our engagement with Ukraine, the IEA warmly welcomed Ukraine as our 11th association country and partner. And our work together is now guided by a 2-year joint work program, which is driven by Ukraine's priorities and signed last December, which includes an initial focus on power system security and energy data. We're very pleased to have Ukraine as part of our IEA family, and we were very grateful for the recent opportunity to review and provide input into Ukraine's new energy strategy through 2050. We were also very pleased to welcome Energy Minister Galushenko, Deputy Minister Demchenkov, and Director General Roman Andarak from the Ministry of Energy to the IEA's 8th Global Conference on Energy Efficiency in Paris in early June, where Denmark has been a strong supporter for many years. And along with Ukrainian participants from the Ministry of Infrastructure and the Energy Efficiency Fund and the State Agency for Energy Efficiency as well, we were very delighted to have the Ukrainian delegation with us. The conference included a special event with Ukrainian colleagues and experts on the role of energy efficiency and clean energy in building back better, as was just referenced, and more securely in a post-crisis response. At the same time, it's painfully evident, as we all know, that Russia's ongoing attacks on critical infrastructure continue to pose an enormous immediate threat to the resilience of Ukraine's energy sector and the availability of power and heat and water and other important things for Ukrainian civilians. Ukraine's Ministry of Energy has estimated by the end of the 2023 winter heating season, Ukraine will have lost 44% of its nuclear generation, 78% of its thermal power plant capacity, 75% of its wind, and 20% of power generation. These are sobering statistics with severe real life and economic consequences. Yet, while the long-term challenge of full recovery and reconstruction is indeed significant, Ukraine's demonstrated remarkable resilience in working to repair its damaged infrastructure and to ensure that it continues to keep essential services working with the support of key donors and allies. And in addition, Ukraine's beginning to think really ambitiously about how to construct a new, more secure energy system. And it's in this connection, as mentioned, that the government's developed a new energy strategy through 2050 that really puts renewable energy at the heart of its future. And this is very timely, as renewables are the fastest deploying energy technologies, the cheapest source of electricity in many countries, and are breaking new records both globally and in Europe. In 2023, global renewable capacity additions are set to soar by almost 1/3 year on year, the largest absolute increase ever to more than 440 gigawatts. And this is equivalent to more than the entire installed power capacity of Germany and Spain combined. This unprecedented growth is being driven by expanding policy support, growing energy security concerns, and improving competitiveness. And renewables are very much the forefront of Europe's response to the energy crisis. The IEA has revised upwards by 40% its forecast for renewable capacity additions in the EU in 2023 and 2024, compared with projections for the same period made before the war. And in terms of technology, rapid growth in distributed solar PV is the main reason for this more positive outlook, accounting for almost 3/4 of the EU forecast revisions. And the acceleration of renewable energy deployment across Europe has also contributed to mitigating the economic impact of the energy crisis. The addition of low-cost wind and solar PV capacity in 2021 and 2022 has helped with reducing wholesale European electricity prices, respectively, by an estimated 8% last year and 15% in 2023. So it's in light of these trends that renewable energy will certainly play a significant role in rebuilding Ukraine's energy sector as well, and also helping to achieve Ukraine's goals of European integration and decarbonization. For Ukraine, increasing the share of renewables in the energy mix presents a chance not only to fundamentally increase energy security, but also a chance to increase resilience. In 2020, renewable energy accounted for roughly 5% of Ukraine's total energy supply and some 12% of its electricity generation, driven largely by biomass and hydropower. But even before the invasion, Ukraine was working to boost solar and wind capacity, with wind accounting for roughly 7% of power generation in 2020. Moreover, renewable energy combined with flexible power generation and Ukraine's nuclear generation from Ukraine's nuclear facilities will play a role in contributing to the decarbonization of Ukraine's energy sector more broadly and boost its prospects of eventually becoming a clean energy hub for Europe. For comparison purposes, Ukraine has better levels of average solar irradiation than Germany. For example, but much less installation. So as a first priority, this is definitely an area for significant acceleration in terms of solar rooftop. And as the second largest country in Europe by surface, geographically, but ranking just 40% in terms of population density, Ukraine has significant potential for not only scaling up solar PV, but it's also well suited for large-scale utility renewable installations, including wind, bioenergy, and utility-scale solar. So a new strategic vision on how to rebuild the Ukrainian power system can truly help increase security of supply while ensuring a more sustainable and affordable energy future for the citizens of Ukraine. And more distributed resources such as solar PV and wind will help increase the mix of domestic production while also increasing the resilience of the system to unforeseen events such as physical threats from the ongoing war and from climate change and other natural disasters. And the recent passage of key pieces of legislation, such as the Energy Market Transparency Law, really are positive steps forward, which we very much applaud. Market, regulatory, and operational frameworks can lend additional flexibility to existing infrastructure and can also open the door for the introduction of other technologies, including eventually clean hydrogen. Energy efficiency gains, as mentioned, will also play an essential role in reducing future demand, saving resources, and lowering investment requirements. So in short, just as the pace of investment in and penetration of renewables is rapidly scaling up, speeding up in Europe and elsewhere around the world, we can certainly anticipate under the right conditions, of course, that these same positive trends will emerge in Ukraine. But we also recognize that Ukraine cannot go it alone. As mentioned, governments and the international financial community must come together with Ukraine to address these financing challenges, de-risk the investment environment, and think creatively about how to involve the private sector across the entirety of the supply chain. Very recently, again, as noted, we saw some excellent progress and announcements being made on these issues at the London Ukraine Recovery Conference. And as Mr. Galashenko noted there, the private sector will need to drive the largest share of investments in renewable energy. And it's for those reasons, as noted, that it really will be important for Ukraine to continue to work to establish that strong regulatory framework that signals a clear, consistent vision, provides the policy stability necessary to facilitate investment, along with an ambitious and green energy strategy compatible with European integration as well. So Ukraine's commitment to think ambitiously about its future while fighting bravely to deal with its present challenges is really very remarkable and to be commended. And it's certainly a next step, an important step in paving the way forward, again, with the ongoing support of the international community to achieving that important, more secure, resilient, and sustainable energy future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. We have around 25 minutes for questions. We have a number of people, I think, who are going to be walking around with microphones if we have questions from the audience. But given that I'm the moderator, maybe I have the privilege of asking the first one. And I will ask you this question, Deputy Minister Vaskov. So we've heard from Marie some of the stats in terms of all the damages that have been done to the energy sector. We've also heard from you what your roadmap is, what you see as short-term, medium-term. I was wondering if maybe you could provide us with an update on where you are on that work right now and where the biggest challenges are. What you have in the room today are people who want to be part of the solution. And so I think if you can be more concrete in terms of where are the challenges, what's been done, and where do you think you need support and help?
Thanks for the question. We need support in all three perspectives. It can be not, we're not talking only about financial support, we're talking about expertise, we are talking about technologies. We are talking about first stage, like emergency works, which we are doing since first rocket attacks our energy infrastructure. This is physically some safety system and construction of decentralization of energy system of Ukraine and construction of alternative stations of the energy generation. We have 3 state bodies who make this work: Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Energy, and Agency of Restoration of Ukraine. If we are talking about a particular steps in which direction which concrete company can propose some assistance or can participate in some works, it is better to leave me a contact during our break, and I will arrange a contact with the person in charge from our side to make a presentation of the particular projects in the regions and our particular needs, because it is very long list of our needs. If we're talking about a strategy for 25 years ahead, of course, first of all, we need your expertise and we need your vision, how it's better to construct most efficient, clean, based on the clean energy standards, the system of Ukraine energy for the future. Again, I will give a context of our colleagues who are doing this. Anna Zamazeyeva is physically with us, the head of the Energy Agency of Ukraine. Also, she can be useful for you. And we give again our particular needs in this case. This is a very long list of the projects.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. I don't know if we have any questions from the floor. Well, you're very shy, so I'll go with a second one, and this time for Minister Jorgensen from Denmark. What we've just heard is that there are huge needs for expertise, and we all know that Denmark is recognized as a global leader when it comes to renewable energy. And so could you maybe provide insights into the approaches that your government has taken that could be helpful for Ukraine?
Aim to help in 3 different ways. One is, of course, financially. These things cost money, and we need substantial funding. That goes without saying, and we have last year allocated a big amount, and we've done that again this year, and we will continue to do so in the future as long as it's necessary. Second is expertise. Now, already before the war, the Danish authorities had a close collaboration with the Ukrainian authorities on green transformation of the energy sector. This is now something that we are expanding, both with regards to more resources, but also the more in-depth collaboration. And thirdly, of course, we hope to be able to do even better in introducing private companies, helping mobilize private investments. I'm very proud that we have so many Danish companies that are very eager to participate in this. I think for many of them, hopefully in the end, it will also be a good business opportunity, but I can say for sure that for vast majority of these companies, it's something that they do because they feel a moral obligation to do so, because they want to help. So for idealistic reasons, they think that since they are established companies with expertise in areas that Ukraine needs, that they want to be there. And we then, of course, as a government, are doing our best to help facilitate those actions.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? Oh, yes, I see a hand. Maybe if you can introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
Thank you very much. My name is Harada from Japanese Embassy, Deputy Head of Mission. I really appreciate your wonderful presentations. I have one question, and you have been talking about greater involvement of private sector. And according to the explanation from the minister, and I really appreciate the spirits of the private sector try to help Ukraine. But do you have any idea to ensure more involvement of the private sector, maybe, and they are also worried about the safety or other things. So is there any particular idea to ensure their involvement more complete way? And of course, Japanese private sectors are very interested in the and participating in the reconstruction process, but some companies are very keen about the safety or other things. So if you have an idea on this side, could you share with us? Thank you.
Deputy Minister, do you want to take this?
Thanks for your question. Regarding the private sector involvement, the best way is to deal on the intergovernmental level, because when Ukrainian government agreed with some support with the Danish government, it is possible to include the private sector's participations in particular projects, for example. So we have to understand about what kind of private business we are talking now. If we are talking about shipbuilding, for example, we have particular project with the Danish government under penalization, I would like to say something like that. But in case it will be signed, the huge role and huge part of the work will be done by the private sector. And it can be used also for another type of intergovernmental cooperation and to another type of renewal and construction, as for housing, as for the energy. It is better to go to work through through the Danish government in order to be included to the further intergovernmental agreements.
Georges, do you want to maybe, piggyback on that a little bit? Because I know UNOPS is working more closely with the private sector, because we understand that this cannot be done by public funding alone.
Well, thank you. I've been on the, as you know, Emily, on climate and energy for many years. Even I've been at the origin of the emissions trading, the cap and trade scheme in Europe in 2003, been minister in Portugal. So just to say that I fully understand the challenges on the enabling context. So we know that just talking about finance won't fix the problem. Just talking about policy reforms won't fix the problem. We need both policy reforms and finance, but at the end of the day, you also need capacity for implementation. So you may have the regulatory framework, you may have the finance, but if you don't have the capacity for implementation, we won't succeed in implementing this renewable energy efficiency project. So I think that it's very important to, as Minister Jorgensen also mentioned, and Mary, this capacity, this reforms that can de-risk investment. So I would say that the involvement of IFIs, the international finance institutions, to de-risk investment is crucial. But I also think that following a careful assessment of the needs, the technical needs, would be important. So for UNOPS, our role is very simple. Compared with other UN agencies, we are non-programmatic, so we don't set norms, policies, standards. So we just work driven by demand. So when a government, being the donor, being the country that is on the lead in this case Ukraine, needs specific support for a project, we deliver the project. And that's why I think that doing a careful assessment of the technical needs would be important. I guess that private sector will be very interested in knowing more about that.
Thank you. And Marie, I saw you nodding. Can you maybe give us a bit more in terms of the experience that you have at the International Energy Agency in helping governments, transition to more renewable energies, and how do you do that by involving all the necessary stakeholders?
Yeah, so the subject of, financing and really mobilizing investment in the clean energy sector in emerging and developing economies is an area that the IEA has been focusing on quite closely in recent years. About 2 years ago, we issued an initial report on this subject, and just a week ago or so, we launched yet another report in connection with the President Macron's summit on climate finance on this very topic. I'm focused very much in this case on the role of the private sector in financing the clean energy transition. But Jorg is absolutely right that it's really important that the IFIs continue to play a role in de-risking the capital and in providing and helping to work with governments precisely on the kinds of regulatory forms and policy certainty that will provide the right kind of environment for attracting capital in countries such as Ukraine and elsewhere in the emerging world. We recognize that the amount of private sector capital going into these regions of the world is far lower than it needs to be. The capital is available. The question is how to attract it. So some of these steps will be key. We've also been tracking the cost of capital through something called a cost of capital observatory, issuing our first report on that late last year, with the second one coming out fairly soon. And that will give us an additional tool for really trying to dig a little bit deeper to understand the issues. So there's no question that the international community has a role to play, just as the countries concerned do in playing their part to help with the overall environment.
Thank you. So, as we've heard, it's not only financing, it's expertise, it's de-risking, it's making sure we all work together. I know we have a question in the third row. Yanni, if you want to hand the mic over.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentations. My name is Katarina Amitsbo. At the moment, I'm working on a hub for Ukraine, Europe. And what we are doing is capacity building. And I just want to piggyback on what was talked about before. And what we do is first we have trained Ukrainian refugees in Denmark. And now we are aiming to train all refugees in Europe, but also Ukrainians in Ukraine on the skills needed for rebuild Ukraine. So we'll do it also virtually. And we do it pro bono with companies or energy companies as well, who want to provide skills training. So my question is mainly to Vaskov, Deputy Minister. So how can we get a better understanding about what skills may be needed for Ukrainians, so we can ensure that Ukrainians are in the driver's seat of rebuilding your country back better? Thank you.
You're absolutely right that this is one of the most strategical direction, if we are not talking not about the money, but about the potential of the people who will execute this program. This is the first time when Ukraine faced with such huge need of renewable modernization, including energy one. Of course, there is not enough high-skilled specialists in such sphere in the whole system of the government, because we are not talking not only about the central government. Such projects will be executed in the cities, so we need to improve the municipal bodies and exactly this time the new structures of municipal bodies, especially for the restoration, for the energy need development, for the housing developing, is under preparation and under implementation. So in order to understand which particular skills need to be prepared and implemented. Again, it is better to talk in the break. I will connect you with our person in charge who will be responsible for this, because it will be the new faces in the areas, and we need also your opinion, and we can arrange a combined work in order to prepare the high-skilled and efficient implementation team, because without people, without efficient team, even if we will have money and technology, we will do nothing. You're right.
Thank you. I was in Ukraine a few weeks ago, and I was really impressed by the resilience of the people, and I was impressed about how we focused on talking about the future. And I think, you know, if you want to join me in thanking the panel, because we really talked about the future, and we really talked about, you know, concrete ways to make sure that these types of conversations can become reality. And so for closing remarks, I'll now invite Georges, if you can.
Just 2 minutes, because I don't dare to do any closing remarks. I was taking notes during the session, and I hope that I pay justice to my fellow panelists. I think that we heard very clearly the priorities from the Ukrainian government regarding energy infrastructure, not only on the short term and preparing for the next winter, but also midterm. 26, and then particularly focus on the decentralization, and then towards 2050 with the net zero transition and reaching neutrality by 2050. So it was very clear, and for the private sector that is with us today and finance sector, it was very clear from the Ukrainian government, the short, the mid and long term, which creates the stability, the predictability that we know it's so fundamental to mobilize resources. Second, we heard from Denmark experience in leading renewable energy efficiency, and also on what is needed to create the regulatory framework, the enabling context to attract and mobilize finance. You know, if we just do some calculation, we have $460 trillion available in the financial market, $460 trillion available in the financial market. What you need for the reconstruction of Ukraine, it's 411 billion. And what we need for the energy sector in the immediate is at least 1.2 billion just for the early recovery. So obviously the issue is not about finance. There is the availability of finance. The question is how to attract the private sector, to mobilize the private sector, because the public sector alone won't be able to provide it. I'm coming from the OECD DAC. I was leading the DAC secretariat, and last year the DAC the donors provided $60 billion to Ukraine. So 16, which is the highest since Iraq in 2005. But if you compare the 16 with the 411 billion that is needed, you would conclude that the public sector alone won't be able to fix the problem. So I think that the Minister Jorgensen clearly framed the need to create the regulatory framework, set the right frameworks to attract private capital is fundamental, particularly in the energy sector. And then we heard from the Deputy Executive Secretary, Director of IEA, Mary Orlick, on the rapid deployment of renewable energy at a global level, but also the massive potential that exists in Ukraine, both on wind and on energy. And again, Mary mentioned the role that private sector plays and the sine qua non condition regarding the de-risking of investment and the MDBs and IFIs role, and also again regulatory framework. So I think that in the presentation from colleagues, it was very consistent, the idea of finance, policy, the de-risking, the regulatory framework, and the role of the private sector. So there is a real call for partnership. So I'm very happy that in today's session we have colleagues from the private sector, from government, from academia, from the UN system. So I'm very encouraged by the first session and looking forward to continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, please, if you join me in thanking our panelists for today's conversation.
So thank you very much indeed, everybody. Good morning again. Excellencies, distinguished guests, online viewers. So welcome to the second session of today's event. My name is Tim Lardner. I'm the country director of the UNOPS office in Ukraine, where we have currently about 60 staff on the ground in Ukraine. So I'm the person responsible for making the UNOPS part of this happen on the ground. I arrived yesterday from Ukraine, and I've witnessed the tragic losses and the astounding resilience of the Ukrainian people, and the steadfast determination to overcome the immense challenges that lie ahead in the most difficult circumstances. Building upon our keynote speakers' addresses, what we're going to do now is to dive into the concrete challenges and opportunities to develop solutions for rebuilding sustainable energy infrastructure. Our panelists will point to best practices, innovative technologies, regulations, and financing tools that can help Ukraine achieve energy independence, security, and sustainability. Many of you will have seen this. 2 weeks ago, I was in Mykolaiv, and together with George, we visited a wind farm somewhere between Mykolaiv and Odessa. It was incredibly sobering. Many of you will have seen an article in The Guardian a couple of months ago. There were more wind farms built in Ukraine last year than there were in my country of the United Kingdom. That's an incredible statistic. That's an incredible demonstration of the resilience and drive of the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian economy, and the international community supporting this way forward, but also private sector's drive to make things happen. I was there during last winter. It was a long, hard, dark winter. Those of us who were there recognized the challenges, but also recognized the incredible work of the Ukrainian authorities, Ukrenergo particularly, to keep power on as best as possible in the face of overwhelming attacks from Russia. That's an incredible achievement. And we have another winter coming up. So I think everybody is aware that we really need to start focusing, start addressing these core issues that we move forward on. So before we start the conversation, I just want to remind you that the session will end around about 12:30, after which we'll serve lunch in the Atlantic Lounge, I'm told it's called, but through that doorway there. We hope you stay with us and continue the conversation over lunch with a very diverse but really incredible group of people we have here. Our panelists will make short presentations, after which I will take questions from you in the audience and perhaps have one or two of my own if you're very shy as you were before. So without further delay, let me introduce the keynote speakers on this particular panel. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Mr. Chris Politis, who's the Deputy Resident Representative in Ukraine for UNDP. Chris will initiate the panel debate by presenting the key findings in the latest Ukraine energy damage assessments. Next on the panel, online, I'm not sure if we can see him. So next on the panel, I introduce Mr. Yaroslav Demchenkov, who's the Deputy Minister for Energy of Ukraine, who's joining us virtually from Kyiv. Yaroslav, welcome. And when you take the floor later, Yaroslav will emphasize the Ukrainian government's initiatives to attract investments, promote energy efficiency, and develop a regulatory framework to support Ukraine's clean energy transition. The third member of the panel is Ms. Anne Hoyer Simonsen, who's the Senior Director the Senior Director of the Confederation of Danish Industry. And Anne will point to some of the experiences, innovative solutions, and potentials of Danish companies when rebuilding sustainably. And will also highlight some of the many ongoing collaborations and initiatives. And then finally, if I could ask Ms. Hanna Zamaziva to join us on stage. Hanna is the head of the State Agency on Energy Efficiency and Energy Saving of Ukraine. Welcome, Hanna. And she will explain the achievements, priorities, and plans of the Ukrainian government regarding energy efficient recovery of Ukraine. She'll also highlight the focus on renewable energy sources, the promotion of energy efficient measures, and the importance of international collaboration and investments. So welcome to the panel. I'd like to give the floor first to Chris Politis. Chris, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. And good morning to everybody. We have some slides just to illustrate what I'm going to be presenting to you, which is the energy damage assessment in its second iteration. And as mentioned by many colleagues, UNDP and the UN system has been at the heart of supporting government in understanding and unpacking further the impact of war and the attacks on the energy system, but also unpacking ways towards greener transition and greener transformation that would start today. UNDP, as you all know, is a normative agency within the UN system, very much closely working with UNOPS and other UN agencies on the ground to deliver support, but also to inform evidence-based policymaking, regulatory frameworks, and also test and make sure that we are bridging the divide between international best practices and the Ukrainian context. Energy crisis, ladies and gentlemen, has been the major, or one of the major actually facets of the crisis in Ukraine. It's exacerbated, and it still exacerbates inequalities today. It has touched the lives of millions, and George just mentioned earlier, 12 million people. It is even further. There's not a single Ukrainian, I would say, that has not lived through at least a week of blackout during the last winter. At least a week of blackout, and by blackout, we do not talk about only power. It's actually heating as well. Energy crisis is also a major hindrance to the recovery process of Ukraine that is at the forefront, and that is a key priority, policy priority for the government today. It is embedded in the 5 priority areas of the recovery of the government, but also, as you would all of you understand and appreciate, it is the basis of lives, livelihoods, economic recovery, prosperity, and an economical revival of the country. It is also at the heart of climate, be it a new climate change instrument, but also, and most importantly, looking at ways to address the climate impact in Ukraine. So as I mentioned earlier, the UNDP on behalf of the UN system and on behalf of the government of Ukraine performed 2 iterations. The first one jointly with the World Bank, where we unpacked the impact of the crisis and the conflict and the attacks on the energy system. And we have since the 10th of October, where the first attack on the energy infrastructure occurred, we have more than 1,500 or 1,500 attacks on energy infrastructure. These assessments and these analyses fed into the RDNA2 that many of you heard, or all of you heard, the various figures referred to, $411 billion for reconstruction and recovery. The third sector that has been hit in terms of priority is the energy sector, with 11 billion or 10 billion plus, and out of which 1.2 billion for immediate recovery and immediate needs. As you can see on the slides, this is showing you the level of impact not only on humans, on Ukrainians, which is 93% of Ukrainians, as I mentioned earlier, suffering from blackouts, but also the spread, the geographic spread of the attacks that occurred last winter. And while one would believe that the forefront of the war, the east of the country would be, of course, more impacted because of the ongoing conflict, it is spread all over. Even in the west of the country, we had blackouts, we had severe impact of the conflict. The Kakhovka Dam as well, the Nova Kakhovka Dam exacerbated actually these attacks, and as you know, has for the first time in the war's history hit a hydropower station. So what I wanted to share with you today are findings of the assessment that show us two major results. The first one is on generation. Today, as mentioned by the colleagues before me, 51% of the power generation in Ukraine has been damaged. And this is, of course, damaged by hydro, nuclear, renewables, thermal power plants that are damaged at 65%. The positive side of the coin, I would say, is that the thermal power plants are coal-fired, or mostly coal-fired and gas-fired. And this is allowing us to look at a window of opportunity in terms of looking at a green transition and a green transformation of the system. The main element here to take, or the main takeaway, is really a challenge in the generation system, and a challenge that is an opportunity. The second figure I want to focus on is what you will see on the lower left side of the slide, which is the maneuvering capacity. And for the non-converted, maneuvering capacities is when you have peaks of consumptions of demand, and the system needs to deliver more power to meet this demand. Today, and this is the challenging part, and I'm looking at many people nodding in the audience, and this is the most important challenge today Ukraine is facing. The maneuvering capacity comes primarily from nuclear and from hydro in Ukraine, and I would turn to the experts also to confirm it. With the Nova Kakhovka Dam breach, there's heavy impact on the maneuvering capacity. With the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant suspension, there's also a very heavy impact. So this is an extremely important figure, actually, that requires a lot of attention from all of us, because the system, while we walk, and Tim was referring to all of us living in Kiev on a day-to-day basis, and walking the streets today, lit. All the streets in Kiev are lit today. However, the system remains extremely fragile. And this is why it remains extremely fragile. There's very little maneuvering capacities. And yesterday morning, we got additional attacks, as mentioned by the Deputy Minister of Restoration earlier. There's also another figure I would like to draw to your attention to, which is the transmission. And as we all know, we have generation capacity, transmission capacity, and distribution. The transmission capacity is actually the joints of the system. It's the substations. And you all heard about transformers, auto-transformers, small pieces, large pieces of equipment. What is most concerning is that we have 45% that are damaged, heavily, heavily damaged. The substations were rapidly fixed, and mentioned earlier as well during the first panel, Ukrenergo did a marvelous job in fixing the substations, but out of 94 high voltage auto transformers, today we have 42 that are non-existing, that are not there. They're patched. And this is the situation we have today in Ukraine. And while the system remains working, the system is extremely, at the same time, vulnerable, but also precarious. We mentioned all the figures related to the rapid damage needs assessment, the RDNA2 that the UN system, the World Bank, and the EU with the government of Ukraine have issued. But we also analyzed internally within UNDP, and the assessment of us transforming the system would cost probably 160 billion euros to transform into green. These figures that George mentioned earlier, the 10 billion, but also the 1.2 billion, are actually immediate needs, urgent emergency needs for 1.2 billion, and 10 billion to replace the system as it used to be, which is something, of course, the Ukrainians and not a single person in this room would want to see. What is important for us to appreciate as well in terms of precarity and volatility of the system is that Ukraine remains importing today. It has exported for some time, and I'm sure some of you have read it in the news, and many of us were relieved in many ways saying Ukraine exports energy today, and that was for a few days. Today, we're still importing, and they're still importing 1,200 to 1,800 megawatt per hour to make sure that stability of the system is secured. So what is needed today is to invest in immediate, and the panelists earlier mentioned that, immediate energy security that feeds, and this is the trick. Allow me a little bit the usage of the concept or the term. This is the trick. The energy security is not about investing only in immediate generation capacity through generators. It is actually feeding very much into the green transition. And at UNDP and within the UN system, we're working very much towards a safer winter. So we're focusing very much on winterization through 4 key pillars. The first one, and I really want to commend actually the analysis that was done by the government of Ukraine and the emphasis put by the Deputy Minister, Yuri, earlier, on the heavily centralized system. Today, the key to secure energy in Ukraine is to decentralize the system. Not only decentralizing it from a governance perspective and looking at municipalities strengthening their systems, but also decentralizing generation. And through decentralizing generations, we're looking at alternative or additional generation capacity that is very much needed. Creating this capacity through, I would not say greener or transformative sources of energy. So instead of looking at immediate generations, we're also looking for UNDP at introducing gas pistons and gas-generated large machinery that would supply electricity to utilities in cities. And thirdly, or most importantly, looking at a transmission system that is sustained as well. And while we're looking at 42 auto transformers being hit today, we need to make sure that Ukrenergo and the other companies, but also the other authorities, state-owned companies, but authorities, can manage the maintenance of the system, particularly on transformation. If you don't have the joints working, the system will not work, even if you have all the generation capacity in the world. And this is where, for example, for UNDP, we were very proud actually to announce, and I'm happy to announce it today, that very soon the first 2 new auto transformers of 330 kilowatt in terms of generation will be arriving in Ukraine in the next week. And this is the importance of an energy security that builds the basis of the green transition. And we see the green transition as mentioned by many of the colleagues earlier, but also very much fleshed out in the energy strategy that my colleague Yaroslav Demchenkov, Deputy Minister of Energy, will definitely focus on and mention, is really building a new regulatory framework that enables green. And we can talk about the innovation in the system that Ukraine is not only putting in place, but is also ahead of the curve. We're looking at synchronization with EU standards and EU regulations, not only as an end, or it's also a means, it's also a stimulus for the whole system to look at standards and to make sure that the system transforms towards those standards. Of course, when we talk about decentralization and the strengthening of the capacities of municipalities and subnational authorities, it is about not only the human capital, but also bankable projects We spoke and we discussed earlier during the first panel the importance of private sector investments. Private sector will come when you have bankable projects. It is important for us to strengthen the subnational capacity, but also the national capacity, which is existing, but subnational capacity to have these bankable projects for a decentralized system to work. And this is where you have, of course, a mix of pillars, of elements that start with a decentralized management and decentralized governance that looks at the human capital and the technical capacities of subnational authorities, that looks at introducing gradually, as of today, a greener mix, but also a greener sources of energy, innovative financing, and we spoke about also de-risking. That remains a key pillar. In London last week, and I look at Jorge, who was in London, and Tim as well, we spoke, and the UK government launched a de-risking mechanism or an insurance mechanism. All the world is looking at how this will work. And I can tell you that myself, I'm very much interested to seeing how this unfolds, because this is probably the most complex. And we heard it actually, and thank you, George, for mentioning earlier. This is one of the most complex, actually, situations where we're supposed to be de-risking capital with an active and ongoing conflict. And there was someone, actually, the Japanese embassy colleague mentioning, thank you for the question, sir, a very interesting question. How do you make sure that you attract capital? Well, I would be myself very keen on hearing an answer as well. But all this to say, it is important for us to look at the key pillars, not only in the near future as we move into greener recovery, but as of today, as we talk about energy security. And I'll end, and I would invite all of you actually to go on, and in the invitation, I think the link is there to go through the report. And we're more than happy at UNDP, UNOPS, and the whole UN system to answer any questions. Please reach out to us. But I wanted to end on one key message: an integrated approach that starts today. An integrated approach that looks at several pillars, but also that looks firstly and foremost at the human capital and at the technical capacities that are existing. The human capital in Ukraine is very solid. What we need to come in with are models, much more than actually solutions and new solutions actually, but much more than actual projects for Ukrainians themselves. It is a new model of doing business, a new model that builds on the human capital, a new model that looks at decarbonization, but also a new model that looks very much on climate change as a driver, and also inclusivity and the role of the various stakeholders. We talk a lot about private sector in energy, but I would like to end on the role of women in energy efficiency and in the energy sector. And on this note, I thank you very much, actually, for the opportunity, and very much looking forward to the questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks, Chris, for the great overview in here. Online, we have Deputy Minister Yaroslav Demchenko. Deputy Minister, thank you so much for joining us online. We'd ask you to take the floor now.
Dear team, I will take a little longer to speak because I will have to leave you early. So at this time, I will also address the question I received early. And dear Chris, thank you so much for such comprehensive and a great presentation from UNDP. Dear hosts and participants, partners and friends of Ukraine, it's an honor for me to join this discussion, really very important discussion. For the last 3 years, I've been focusing on energy transition and international partnership as a Deputy Minister for Energy. And before this, for over 5 years, I dealt with sustainable development projects at UNOPS and UNDP. The gained experience is essential now to recovering my own country, my Ukraine. All the civilized world supports Ukraine to withstand this brutal, illegal war. Denmark is definitely in the vanguard of this support. Your input to rebuild the Mykolaiv region is priceless. The region shields southern Ukraine and was badly destroyed by Russia in 2022. But you helped it overcome the most critical challenges and damages. Moreover, a year ago, Denmark was the first who contributed to the newly launched Ukraine Energy Support Fund, encouraging other countries. Your contribution was pressure, your lead, was really fruitful and important, owing to equipment, parts, and machineries procured via this fund withstood the winter despite regular Russian missile terror. Recently, another donation from Denmark was announced is coming to the fund. I thank you so much for this, because the war is not over and the winter is closer than it seems in July. There is a long-lasting and successful story of the Ukrainian-Danish energy partnership. Denmark and Ukraine had a tight relationship in renewables long before the war. To a large extent, Ukrainian wind farms were running on Vestas turbines. Unfortunately, today, the main part of these wind farms is damaged or destroyed. Those remaining on the temporary occupied territory were often smashed by Russians with no military purpose, just because of hatred to the world which promotes sustainability, including clean and affordable energy. We continue emphasizing Russia imagines itself as a hydrocarbon superstar and assaults not only Ukraine, but the whole idea of sustainable development. Therefore, for us, there is no other way than to enhance energy transition, leaving fossil fuels behind. On this pathway, this is extremely important to implement experience and instrumentariums of the UN family agencies for sustainable development. They have a necessary mandate and can realize projects under special conditions in war period of time. In 2019, Ukraine was ranked in the global top 10 for the pace of renewable development. The war drastically changed the situation, but did not change our intention to become a green energy hub, sustainable energy hub of Europe, and produce carbon-free energy not only for domestic Ukrainian needs, but for other European countries too. It means after the war, we will return to this leading 10. Actually, we do not wait until the war is over. A month ago, a private Ukrainian company launched a new wind farm that is located just 100 kilometers from the front line. This is probably the first wind farm in the world built amid the war. Vestas windmills have been raised in the Mykolaiv region as the symbol of the common victory and rebirth. In Ukraine, Energy Strategy 2050, we reconfirm our intention to reach carbon neutrality and energy together with other EU countries. The main stake is renewable, is made in wind generation, especially offshore and onshore. Only the offshore power potential of Ukraine was estimated by the World Bank at 250 gigawatts. We need Danish expertise, technologies, and investment to reveal this potential and use it for the good of the United Europe. Ukrainian investors do not wait until the war is over, and neither does the Ukrainian government. We elaborate on necessary initiatives and regulatory frameworks to support Ukraine's energy transition and attract needed investments. Often we are drafting, then write on bomb shelters waiting out the next Russian missile attack. I want to mention several acts from our green energy package aimed to speed up the energy transition. They were elaborated in line with the EU legislation, reflecting Ukraine's purpose of full EU membership and full energy market integration. The most recent is the law on the promotion on biomethane production. The national regulator adopted amendments to gas transportation legislation, enabling access of the biomethane producers to the gas infrastructure. With estimated Ukraine's potential of 22 BCM, we expect 5 new plants that will be launched this year with a 70 BCM overall value. So of them actually, some of them actually have already been launched. In February 2022, we implemented another act which provide us options for start business in energy storages. And also we understand that we have quite important weather affected and not flexible renewables. And we prepare some acts related to this. Were elaborated necessary act to increase flexibility and competition for renewable energy producers. This area was a bit distorted by feed-in tariff, and we plan to shift towards feed-in premium. The additional support mechanism is net billing with direct contract between green energy producers and consumers. One more essential step is green certificate implementation that will guarantee the origins of renewable energy. Dear colleagues, as I have mentioned, the weather-dependent energy sources, such as solar and wind, poses a significant problem for grid sustainability and reliability. I think for the UNOPS, with its sustainable investments and infrastructure and innovation initiative, and for the UNDP with existing program in Ukraine, the following involving could be relevant. Ukrainian green recovery will require technology which enable the conversion of surplus renewable energy into other forms of energy or products, such as hydrogen, ammonia, or synthetic fuels. This not only allows for better integration of renewable energy into the grid, but also offers new opportunity for decarbonizing various sectors of the economy and stimulate localization of manufacture, equipment, and green tech production needed for green recovery, and also support decentralized generation. Such projects will create more sustainable jobs, protect our nature by supporting the transition towards a low carbon economy, and increase countries' resilience based on green tech and green affordable power. And I believe such projects could be developed with the UN agencies, the state, and donors partnership. This area of our common interest, for sure. And I believe that we can find this common interest and start this business. Dear friends, today we are also developing a war risk guarantee mechanism along with European Commission and authorities of European countries to enhance investment security. And our main idea, the framework of our legislative effort is aimed at shaping a transparent and competitive energy market, like in the EU states. And I personally believe that offering this war, no one will call Ukraine a post-Soviet country again. Ukraine is a European country that shares common European values, principles, and approaches, including those regarding businesses. Hans Christian Andersen once said that just living is not enough. One must have sunshine, freedom, and a little flower, and have clean energy for peace, sustainability, and prosperity. I dare to add. Thank you for your attention, dear friends.
Agency in Ukraine is a main energy manager, the institution responsible for the state policy and program formulation of multi-sectoral energy efficiency, renewable energy sources, alternative energy sources, and decarbonization. Another important thing, the strategic vector of Ukrainians' recovery and development requires sound mechanism for fund mobilization and management, best available technology transfer, actual implementation of state and donor-supported programs on energy efficiency, renewable and alternative energy use. The government of Ukraine and state agency already working on this task. The Ukrainian parliament adopted at the President Zelensky signed of the law on the establishment of the state fund for decarbonization and energy efficiency transformation. The fund will redistribute proceeds from the CO2 tax following the polluter pays principle onto energy efficiency measures and projects for decarbonization. They manage the fund and coordinate all encompassing support. State agency has created the National Decarbonization Platform, NDP, a special purpose vehicle to support energy efficiency, renewable, alternative energy sources programs and projects implementation with, first of all, mobilization and management of financial resources with application of full range of financial mechanisms, lending, leasing, guarantees, factoring. Second, best available technology transfer and access to all groups of public and private consumers. And last one, promotion of implementation of energy management system and ESCA modalities. The NDP is the only state financial mechanism that operates on the principle of targeted revolving financing for energy efficiency, recovery, and development of Ukraine. And state agency invites international organizations, government cooperation agencies and funds, equipment manufacturers and technology providers to join our efforts for recovery and green transition of Ukraine through the National Decarbonization Platform. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Hannah, thank you very much indeed for those really important points and a reminder of why we're here. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to try to go back to Kyiv now. Apologies about earlier. Okay, it's apparently we're not able to resolve this. Kyiv was connected on 2 separate connections, and the live stream was playing back at the same time, and they're not able to resolve that. So our apologies, we're not able to connect with the Deputy Minister on this occasion. So I think we've heard 3 really interesting presentations with different perspectives. What I'd like to do now is to open the floor. If there's anybody who would like to raise any questions to the panel, draw any pertinent issues out. We have a man with a microphone who's ready to zoom to you first of all. Perhaps I can open the discussion with something while you take stock and see whether there's a way forward on this. What I'd like to ask a generic question, a general question to all 3 of you on the panel. Rebuilding sustainable energy requires a collaborative approach involving multiple stakeholders. It's clearly not one organization, one people, one team. How can public-private partnerships be strengthened to accelerate progress? How do we do this? How do we initiate this? How do we catalyze that? And are there any successful examples that could be used as models for Ukraine? It's quite a broad question, but I hope it's able to draw some thoughts from the floor. Hannah, I wonder whether you have any thoughts at this point, or whether you.
Yes, we have before some successful story in energy efficiency projects and programs. I have some notice about it, and I could describe. But you see, before we start energy efficiency, it is very important, but it's not only about technical solution. It is about economy, because the cost of other each products and services includes consists cost of energy resources. And when we talk about energy efficiency, we talk about recovery our economy, not only buildings and premises. And you see about some successful stories in our country in energy efficiency before the war. Because now we have only programs and projects with UNDP and ESCA modalities and with UNIDA. Thank you very much, UN, for this help and support. Okay. We have state programs before on energy efficiency, especially in public sector and for households. ESCA in public sector has been especially active since 2017, and we had over 600 energy service contracts for school, hospital, and kindergartens for a total amount of about 16 million euros. But now we have a need and potential for future ESCA projects in Ukraine. We have 80,000 institutions, schools, kindergartens, hospitals, government buildings, which are financed from the state and local budgets. And estimated energy service potential via ESCA is more than 2 billion euros. And I hope we, in the nearest future, could increase our project with UNDP, because we work in this sphere. That is why, through the National Decarbonization Platform, we plan to launch a low-interest rate instrument to support ESCA companies. We also consider developing a super ESCA state company. For households from 2016 till 2021, we had a warm loan program for private consumers to do energy-saving measures, and with the state compensating interest and part of the loan. The program turned out to be in demand. Several 100,000 households received loans for thermal modernization of their homes and energy efficiency equipments. The total amount of investment raised through the program was almost 334 4 million euros. At the same time, Ukraine's energy efficiency goals are more ambitious, and we want to provide a lot of projects and with our partners, UN, for example, with government, other countries, and we hope we could cooperate private public sector, governmental and non-governmental funds to develop this sector and provide and spread through population energy efficiency measures.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Hannah. Very interesting to hear your thoughts. Maybe I could go firstly to Anne. In terms of, you're coming from the private sector, you're coming from a different perspective to a number of us sitting here. Are there any models you've seen? Are there any thoughts you have on this?
Yes, I think the first thing is that you know you're welcome, and we don't have any doubts in that context right now. The second thing is that the market is actually very efficient in making private companies find each other, forming ESCOs, doing large projects, but you need to have trust in that there will be no interference with the market. You can still put money into the market or tenders and so on. So that would be important. And that's like it's always. But there are two things that are different here. Is it bankable in a more insecure situation? And what about securing actually insurance-wise your actives? And that is not something private companies or a sole country can solve. There we have to look to cross-national collaborations that simply need to be fixed. And that doesn't mean that private companies cannot participate, large insurance companies and so on. But you need to have a model so that when companies are coming in, it's more like they always do. They are super efficient and will do a very good job then. And also not needing you to put out a lot of small projects, the market will solve it themselves. And you have very wisely chosen market instruments, for example, a price on carbon dioxide. And that will make you able to scale much more faster than if everything has to be planned from government side.
Thank you very much indeed, Anne. Really appreciate it. Chris, from your side.
Thank you. And very much in the same vein as Anne and Hannah mentioned, it is important for us to find, as I mentioned earlier, platforms for collaboration. So I'm very happy and thank you very much for mentioning the successful project that UNDP has been very proudly supporting in terms of energy efficiency in public buildings. It is inherently a PPP where ESCO companies come in and then support the public sector. But I would like to touch upon an important element and aspect of the innovative platforms that Ukraine quite aggressively is pushing for. And it is related to the most recent law that was passed last week on restoring and the restoration in specific and green transformation on the energy system in Ukraine, the 9011 one. And you mentioned the remit law earlier, Mary, and this one in specific is really looking at regulating the green market and also providing a platform for even consumers, even individuals themselves, to bring back energy into the grid. And this is, and truly it is very much commendable on the one hand, because the regulatory frameworks are far ahead, I would say, than what the market or the unfortunate situation today in Ukraine would allow us to aspire for. Yet at the same time, it is important for us in fora like this one to acknowledge and commend very much the visionary leadership and also the vision that the government and all the regulators and all like your agency in specific, Hannah, as well, is pushing and advocating for. And it's important for us to continuously working on those regulatory frameworks. But I'd like to echo very much what Anna mentioned earlier. It is about an operating environment, after all. It is about access to financing. It is about also making sure that you have an environment that attracts both domestic, secures and attracts both domestic, but also foreign investment. And this is not an easy thing to do in the current situation. The banking sector, and this is something, allow me the tangent here. I was in Ukraine in March, just after the invasion. And I myself could pay with Apple Pay. I always take this example, and still at the beginning of the war, I still remember my engagement with various stakeholders, including the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we were taking this example as an illustrative example to say how the system remains functioning. And we were paying. The banking sector never was shaken. Of course, it was shaken on many other fronts, but it remained functional and operational. Yet at the same time, the packages of support are not there because of the issue of insurance.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I think some really useful points that came out of that general response. I'm looking to the floor. Some of you must have something. There we go. Thank you. Let's go to the front from.
Great. Well, thank you very much to all of you for your presentations. Was really, very sobering in one respect with regard to the work and the study you've done on the destruction and the damage to the energy infrastructure more broadly. But it's important to understand that. And of course, to both of you, the other two speakers, your emphasis on international collaboration. I can see a very strong outreach stand from Denmark and the Business Association, which is really very important. For Hannah, it's interesting to hear about all of the next steps that you're envisioning. And I was curious when it comes to these innovative platforms that you mentioned, the Fund for Decarbonization and Energy Transformation, for example. Is that something that's already been set up with available funding, or are these illustrative proposals that you have in mind in order to accelerate energy efficiency and decarbonization?
Thank you for this question. Very important. And you see this question and last response. You see, National Decarbonization Platform we created when we analyzed all barriers what have now project UNDP in Ukraine when they cooperate with commercial bank, because it was they have a lot of risk and strong regulation from the National Bank of Ukraine. And we created this National Decarbonization Platform. It is a financial tool. We have a lot of license from the National Bank of Ukraine, and we want to promote with small rate loans for population, for municipalities, for businesses. And it is proposal. We have 3 levels for cooperation with foreign countries and partners, with the municipalities and with our energy services. First of all, we want to take loan for people, population, businesses, and municipalities, and cover money from the Fund for Decarbonization. We want to attract investments from the non-government and governmental funds. We could do it, and we join you to we invite you to join to us, to our platform. We could send you our introduce and information about how we could do it. We have a scheme, and it is very easy to work in Ukraine inside for support different projects in renewable energy or energy efficiency measures, and work with the municipalities and businesses. Because we have license, we could communicate, and now we We collect feasibility studies from municipalities and businesses for next step analyze and proposal to give them loan. It is first step. Second, we want to connect and cooperate with business and producers of energy equipment, energy efficiency equipments from other countries. And we want to invite to join to our platform and to be represent on this platform because it is very difficult sometimes for small communities, for small municipalities or small and medium enterprises sometimes find a good solution in technical solution and find a good offer for energy equipment, energy efficiency equipments, and find these equipments in Europe or USA or Japan, for example. And now we want to make unit platform where our people from Ukraine or businesses could find technical solution and this equipment. And second, as a state agency, we could provide super ESCA and provide energy management service, energy audit service. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Hannah. Thank you very much. I think we have time for one more quick question. Okay, your hand was there, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the really interesting presentations. My name is Emily Kadimi. I'm the deputy at the Irish Embassy here. I just wanted to pick up on the point, Chris, that you made about the important role of women in the energy sector, and maybe you could speak a little bit, and likewise Hannah and the other speakers, on in building back better what role women can play in the kind of gender considerations in terms of decision making and that sort of thing. Yeah, thank you so much.
Chris, thank you very much. And basically we have two approaches or two trends at UNDP we very much focus on. The first one is very much in line with what Hannah was mentioning in terms of the ESCO and the new smaller businesses. There's a need today to invest very much in revitalizing the economy of Ukraine and investing in MSMEs. And women-headed MSMEs are very much a target of UNDP and the UN system, I would say. And I look at Tim as well, and I can speak on behalf of UNOPS in this regard, because we very much align in this regard when we talk about economic recovery. So it is one approach to look at the triangulation and the intersect between reinforcing a business, making sure that we're looking at a women-headed business, a women-headed women initiative, or specifically for women-led initiatives, but also the green angle and very much the energy efficiency when it comes to this particular issue. This is one. The second element is the unfortunate reality of Ukraine today, where a lot of imbalances in terms of gender. We have many women-headed households today because of the reality of the war and the men being at the front. But also, and most importantly, you have always had traditionally women in major sectors in the economy, be it the agriculture and other sectors. And this is where we are very much focused on making sure that access to credit, access to financing is targeted. So what we do in the West, or what we have done in the West of Ukraine, when we created the ecosystems to absorb but also support displaced businesses, was also had a very strong angle and strong focus on women, making sure that women are actually agents of change, but also, and of course, this is a concept we all use, but also an agent of economic recovery, particularly when it comes to the movement of businesses.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. I'm not sure I want to add another male voice to that, but if either Hannah, perhaps you have a quick final observation.
Okay, could I ask you again? You asked about role of women in the energy efficiency sphere. You see a little bit facts in the State Agency of Energy Efficiency. 75% it's women. You see, and now in our country, when during the war, maybe women have a lot of chance to be ahead. A lot of different projects, agency, and they have a good possibility to create something and participate in other projects in energy efficiency, renewable energy programs. You see now in our country, I think it is one of the good challenge for them.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And if I could ask you just for a couple of quick final comments before we wrap up.
I think it's pretty obvious that Ukraine need all hands on deck. So therefore, it's necessary to invest in everybody in Ukraine, no matter the sex or whatever else, when it comes to skills, possibilities for education, finance, for doing business, and so on. And I think that everything is in a critical situation now. And that would be a very, very prudent step to take for Ukraine, to target a few things here and make it better to the benefit of the country. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed, Anne. So firstly, thank you to the panel. It's a huge challenge, but I'll try and just draw out a couple of key points from the conversation we've had. And thank you again. We've heard from practical perspectives, from practical voices on the ground in terms of the level of damage to the energy infrastructure requiring huge, long-term, significant commitment. Chris presented 51% of the energy infrastructure has been damaged. He also flagged the really importance of de-risking investment, and let us hope that the London conference was a catalyst to opening some of those doors that have been slowing things down, but also flagging the opportunity to rebuild. We have a huge challenge, but it's also an opportunity that it behoves us to grasp and move forward, taking an integrated approach to do that. We also heard some of the thoughts on experiences, innovative solutions, and potential to Danish companies when rebuilding sustainably. And talked about, again, using the opportunity of the horrendous situation that Ukraine is in, but using that opportunity to springboard, bring innovation, bring new thoughts, bring new technology, bring new greener views on things. And also, thank you so much for flagging that Danish businesses are, I think you said, willing to help with the words you use, but we've already seen that on the ground. But I think it's great that this just underlines and reinforces this. And I thought it was also very interesting to see you using an example of energy transition of Denmark over the last 20 years. And perhaps that's a model for energy transition of Ukraine over the next 10 years. Perhaps we can compress that as those models are there. We also talked about the Ukrainian focus on renewable energy sources, promotion of energy efficient measures, and the importance of international collaboration and investments. And Hannah, thank you so much for, quite honestly, bringing a human voice to this as well. And it's, you know, your opening words, I think, reminded us all of the reality. We're talking high level energy, we're talking high level politics, but there are people at the end of all this. And thank you for reminding us of that, Hannah. But I think you also talked about the fact that businesses are still moving. Biomass in Chernihiv, the wind farm that several of us have referred to in Mykolaiv. And the government is hungry to find solutions and move forward on this. And again, thank you for your broad perspective on this. So thank you again. My apologies, our apologies for the fact that we were not able to bring the Deputy Minister into the call. It's an unfortunate situation, but I would ask you to thank the panel that is in front of us for their participation and their words and thoughts. So thank you very much.